Phoebe, welcome to the show. Now, let me ask you, are you ready for a DMC?
Thank you for having me, Jono. It's an absolute pleasure. What a lovely way to kick off my Sunday. Thank you.
No worries at all. It's great to have you here. So let's dive straight in. What is something about your upbringing that still influences you today?
Good question. I'd say dance and movement. So when I was 4, my mum, we were living in Fulham in South London. And I think, she threw me into ballet. And I went along and got into it, tutu and tights and the whole thing. And it was very strict and, pointing toes and quite a fierce teacher. And I found the whole thing incredibly strict. And I actually found myself tightening, my whole body sort of constricting. And I think I must have said, my mum maybe over dinner one day sort of said, Phoebes, do you want to try hip hop or street dance, something a little bit more kind of chilled? I said, yeah, that sounds cool. So I went along age 7 to street dance. And that was in like Battersea, Hammersmith. And it was called Stereo Funk Collective. And I was, to be brutally honest, I was so out of my comfort zone. It was like, I felt like I came from a very different background to everyone there. The colour of my skin was different to everyone else in the crew. I spoke with a different accent. Felt like a bit of an outsider, really. But then we started dancing and the music came on. And I was like, holy shit, are we allowed to swear on this?
Yeah,
I
that's
was like, this is phenomenal. I'm dancing and I'm relaxing. I'm not thinking about my mind. I'm thinking about my body. And I sort of realised I was quite good at it. And I kept going. And then I actually got into the performance crew. And from the age of about sort of 10, started rigorously training to be part of this sort of performance crew that we toured kind of the UK. We did lots of different competitions. And I was doing this alongside my schooling and exams, the 11 plus, etc. So we even looked at Britain's Got Talent. This was sort of similar time to Diversity. Diversity were really coming into fame. And I loved it. It really... going back to your question, so yeah, that is something from my childhood that even now I genuinely rely on for a sense of sort of self. So, if I'm feeling a bit wobbly, I'll go to a dance class or I'll go and do a bit of movement and I'll instantly feel like Phoebe Averdieck again. So yeah, that's something that I do. Yeah.
Love that.
And I have my mum to thank for that, I think, genuinely.
I love that. I love that. So it sounds like that's kind of your happy place, would you say?
Yeah. God, yeah. I don't know. Can you relate to that? Dance and movement?
So as someone with dyspraxia, not really, but I can admire it.
Yeah. I do believe everyone can dance.
I'm sure.
And I think
Yeah.
it's just a matter of releasing the brain and then just really listening. And then the second you kind of get moving, it's almost contagious.
True.
But yeah, I think people associate it with weddings and family parties and sort of sitting on the rim of the room and you kind of, oh God. But yeah, I think it can be so joyful.
It is. Don't get me wrong. I love dancing. I'm terrible at it, but I do enjoy it.
Yeah. More like, just embrace it. Whatever it is, comes out.
For sure. You should see me at a festival.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing that.
Maybe at Latitude. We'll see. So, okay, well, the perfect follow-on question for that is, what made you want to start your own podcast? Was it kind of driven by curiosity, a passion, or more of just I need to do this type feeling?
So I started the podcast in 2025. I was working in a corporate job at the time when the ideation happened. So I was actually at Deliciously Yellow, which was a sort of plant-based food company, back in January 2025. I was surrounded by a very, she was Ella Mills, a fantastic founder, huge company. I was in the sales department. And I'd always been surrounded by entrepreneurial energy ever since a very young age. My father was, he's an incredible entrepreneur, no doubt, built 3 companies, and he just doesn't really stop. He's just always on a mission every day. He wakes up and he's got this incredible energy. So I think you do pick up on that. You grow up around it. And it was probably around sort of, February, March. And I started sort of sketching some ideas, Phoebe Asks and, presenting and interviewing and what that might look like. And the first brand that I thought I could do it with was Tommy's Trunks, which was a trunks brand that's really kind of gone like that. And I actually went to school with the founder. And I thought, well, yeah. And he ended up turning the interview down because he was just so busy with opening actually a huge shop in London. Big up Tommy's Trunks. But I kind of refined the idea over summer. I was working at United Agents, which is a talent agency. And I was actually in the department of presenters for a few weeks and I loved it. And I thought, wow, this is such an incredible career. People presenting, podcasting. I was sort of processing the contracts and stuff and working across all these different deals. And I thought, wow, this is a real business. So I sort of started formulating the idea in my bedroom, at the weekends. And then I sort of had the guts to really go freelance. And in September, I broke off and I decided I was going to start my own business. And I was going to also freelance for Amazon and Amazon Prime, BBC, whatever kind of work in the media production sphere I could take in order to support this mission. So it was a real risk. And in September, I secured a couple of interviews first. So in August, I think I got a yes from Daniel Land, who was he's a great entrepreneur. He started Coco de Mama, a huge chain restaurant, and then he sold up and he sold it to the Azuri Group. And then he took on Don't Tell Dad, which is one of my favorite restaurants of all time. And I grounded myself in food and hospitality because that's a world that I was familiar with, having worked at a few different food companies, the Coconut Collaborative, Spooner's Desserts, which was a startup, Deliciously Ella, and restaurants. And so it was in August that I started recording. So I did Daniel, I did George Pell. George Pell was my first ever interview. George Pell, for people listening, he learnt his craft in London at Home House. He was a managing director at huge members clubs, the Gaucho, and then he went from L'Escargot, which is a beautiful French restaurant in Soho, and took it to Suffolk, the coast, and took the concept of snails and delicious French cooking and took it to the coast and thought, we're going to rebrand this as the Suffolk. So it was all about, I wanted to know about his culinary journey from taking a business from the city to a really beautiful little town called Aldeburgh, where actually I grew up, or, a lot of my growing up happened there. And he was fantastic, really interesting. And I got a lot of energy out of that first one. I kind of kept building. I was like, I'm not going to stop until this really becomes something. That's where it all began in sort of August, September 2025.
Brilliant. And I had a listen to the interview you did with George Pell. And I have to say, I found it really inspiring. And what I really loved about it was the way he was very kind of gently spoken, very respectful, but there was kind of quite a bit about, almost the youth of today, mental health, things like that within that kind of field, which was refreshing to hear because you don't often hear someone kind of high up like that speaking so candidly about topics like that. Usually it is primarily just business focused. So it was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you. I'm glad you connected with that. It felt really important to talk about anxiety. He employs so many young people. That's the essence of his hospitality business, is that it's all people coming out through college or university, and then they get into these jobs. And so it's his responsibility to support them and actually to nurture their careers. And they might end up being a really fantastic chef and moving to London, or, I wanted to talk about drinking and how anxiety has changed people's view of drinking. And funny enough, George seems to have ADHD himself as well. From what he was saying, he has this sort of racing mind. And ironically, the racing stops when he's in that restaurant environment. He said it's sort of like a zoom feeling. It almost sort of everything goes quiet because obviously you're hitting that dopamine. So yeah, everything's here, and which I thought was really interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Love that. And so obviously you made the decision to almost jump ship from the kind of corporate life and go into the creative field more. How did you find that? Because me personally, that's something I would love to do. I'm a creative at heart. And as you know, I'm kind of in the process of building up my own creative business in the background. But I guess what's holding me back is the security. I have a 9-to-5 job that pays the bills. If I didn't, I wouldn't be able to pay the bills. So that is what's holding me back. How did you navigate that?
So I went to drama school. I trained at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. So I actually trained to be an actress. So that creative gene has always been in me. And when I first moved to London, I wanted to make it as an actress, but realised quite quickly that it wasn't a direct route and that I was going to have to do some other stuff. So I got into corporate work. And I realised I wanted to use my brain and make money. And I am a capitalist at heart, no doubt. It's a brutal world out there and you have to, you've got to eat. So I was under no illusions and it wasn't really a straightforward decision. But I think it's, and I'm still working it out, to be honest, but it's a combination of, you've got to be really structured with your time. You've got to be okay about not always knowing when the next paycheck is coming in. You've got to have a lot of self-starter motivation. get up and go, get up at 7:30, no matter what, because you've got to get up and you got to. I had Phoebe Asks. I also had, some big production jobs on the go. I was also doing babysitting. I was also doing fitness teaching. So I kind of got qualified in that area again. And Zumba, LBT, aqua fitness. And I do those classes maybe 4 times a week as well. So I think having little moments in your diary that are, you keep your diary very structured, just like a 9 to 5. And that for me saved me, because I was like, okay, I wake up, I know what I'm doing, and planning and structure. So I think that's really important. Number one is planning and structure. I think I knew the podcast wasn't going to make money immediately. I mean, my dad kept saying that to me. He was like, this can't be your solo gig. This is not going to bring in any cash. And I think, it's not until you hit like 50 episodes that you start maybe profiting. And even then you have to hunt down sponsors and so that's like a work in progress. So I think you just got to kind of know it's coming and be okay. And, I took up some PR work recently for this fantastic PR company, and bend your skills that you're using, your journalism skills, your presenting skills. I want to work for the BBC, and work out where you want to go with your career, and try and use those skills on a daily basis. Just kind of you forge it out, and also don't worry. It's okay. I think when I got to London, I was so wrapped up in anxiety because I was like, I need to be doing something every single day. And I think I've let some of that go now. And that's really benefited me, because I think patience is a huge, huge, huge thing. And as long as every day you're getting up and you're working towards that goal, or it might be 4 goals, you're working towards that goal and you're incrementally getting there, you start to see the rewards. And now I'm beginning to reap the paychecks start coming in, the invoices, and you can actually get some confidence with that. And you're recognized professionally for who you are. And that feels really great when it starts working. So I think once you get through that really awkward 3 to 6 months of being self-employed, I'm finding now that it gets quite joyous, and it's still hard, but you start kind of reaping the rewards a little bit, maybe. Yeah.
Fantastic. And we'll have to, specifically with kind of the time management and the structure side of things, that's something that I really want to discuss in more depth with yourself, but we'll save that for future episodes.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a lot we can talk about there.
And actually, I'm aware, sorry, that was very much about sort of...
No.
That was very kind of monetary, and it's not always about that, but I think you've got to be realistic, haven't you? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Okay, so you've launched the podcast, you've got that running. Was there a specific moment when it all started to click for you?
God, Jono, I think it's still clicking. We're in episode 5. I'm not a pro. I'm learning every day. I think you get positive feedback, and that's always encouraging. But I also look for critical feedback. So after every single interview, I review, write down what I could work on. But when did it start to click? I think after the Daniel Land episode 3, a BBC producer said to me, I won't say her name, but she's been at the BBC for 25 years in documentary film. And she said that was different. That felt, he was a really enigmatic guest, and your interview style felt more natural and more fluid. And some of your questioning was really brilliant. That gave me confidence to go on to episode 4 with Dima Denega and push for more uncomfortable topics. We touched on politics, we touched on Ukraine, and maintaining his factory in Ukraine despite the war. That felt quite, rocky territory. And then kind of the more I push, I'm actually, with each interview, I'm interested in going into something a little bit darker, a little bit more, so that push my guest into a slightly awkward topic like insecurity that they might not even have thought about. And that for me, then I get something quite rich out of that.
And that kind of falls in line with, what we're doing with Time for a DMC, because I'm someone, and I'm sure you're much the same, who wants to fully understand a person. And for me, I feel like the key to that is having these types of conversations, especially the long form ones, where you can really kind of delve deep into a topic in order to understand who it is that you're speaking to. So no, I can completely respect and agree with that. Who were you when you started compared to who you are now?
Oh, it might make me a bit emotional, actually. I think September was a really hard time for me because I'd left my big job in Soho and my relationship wasn't going that well. And I was sort of falling apart a little bit. And I felt I just got this ADHD kind of diagnosis or started working with a coach, a therapist to she said to me, Phoebes, I think you need to go on medication. And so it was a very confronting time for me, September. And then October, my relationship ended. And so I felt very kind of stripped back, really raw. And I was really upset, really hurting. And I had to get this business moving, get this podcast moving in that state. So it was real survival. Like I felt like I was tapping into something really raw to kind of push me forward. And actually my work saved me in that time, I think. So I think the person that started this podcast was deeply insecure, despite never ever seeming so. Like, I think I'm outwardly a very confident person, certainly on my Instagram and my public profile, probably come across very confident. But I think a lot of people with ADHD will acknowledge that that's just a front and we have so much energy. The person behind closed doors can be quite broken or quite kind of angry with themselves. Every day is a struggle in some ways, and you make mistakes constantly and you get criticized for it, and it can feel like an ongoing battle. But so yeah, I think that girl was very much a girl who was like trying to figure it out, and I was really teaching the tech myself as well. So I was learning the tech, the whole operation, microphones, cameras, tripods, streaming, how to do a live recording. I luckily had some assistance with that. And then as I started recording more and more, and actually once I finished my relationship, I was able to really go full focus, hyper focus on my work. And then I did the Supper Club, which was like a big networking event in December, around my birthday, which was fantastic because I got all my friends there and I did a huge speech about the podcast in West London and Shepherd's Bush. And it sort of felt like a real mature moment of, this is it, we're going to do this. And so I'd say, but now I'm really at the age of 26, I feel like I'm really coming into self-knowledge, and I'm getting there. I think a lot more confident and holding myself. 2026 for me is really about control and maintaining control and not being taken advantage of. So yeah, I'd say I'm a lot stronger than I was when I first started the podcast.
Oh, no, I'm really happy to hear that. And I just want to touch upon something briefly you mentioned with relation to ADHD. We'll, touch on this more a little bit later, but obviously I can really relate to what you said about, it's almost putting on an act. I call it masking, and sometimes we do it without really even thinking about it in a public, place where you've got to be social. Even if you're really not feeling like it, you do naturally end up masking. And it's quite interesting kind of, having the opportunity to talk to you about that as someone who understands, because at the end of the day, as ADHDers, we are authentic, we are creative. And I think it's important for us to try and embrace that and to be ourselves instead of trying to fit in with the neurotypicals.
Yeah, I think so. Because our brains are wired differently. So I'm not going to go on about it the whole time because that doesn't feel productive. But I am going to not give myself some slack, but just give myself some awareness of that. Yeah.
And that's where it starts, awareness is the key, because then you can kind of start to address and build on things from there. But it is, about staying true to yourself as well. With that, has the podcast challenged any of your beliefs? Say if there are any kind of limiting ones that you've had prior to starting?
Yeah, good question. These are very, I like these questions. Has the podcast challenged my beliefs? I think previously I've associated podcasting or radio or broadcast journalism with a different style. I think it can be very polished and it's all quite commercial. And there's some fantastic podcasts out there. I love Louis Theroux because he's so unfiltered and awkward and so kind of determined to get the truth out of his guest. And he's rocked some serious boats as well with that. He got one of his sponsors, British Airways, dropped him because of his. So I think I had this association. I didn't really have a background in radio or podcasting, and I didn't suffer from what's that syndrome? What's that sort of when you feel like a stranger to the imposter syndrome? Yeah, I didn't have that because you don't really have that with ADHD because you just kind of get up every day and you do whatever the fuck you want to do because you've got that impulsive brain.
Yeah.
And I have always been like that. Like I put my mind to something and I will fucking do it. You know, I'm like,
Hyper-focus.
I think even from like a young age, I was like, I remember losing my dummy and I went rummaging through the dustbins to try and find it. You know, I'm like, I am quite relentless and it can be a little bit sickening. Like people are like, fucking hell, just calm down. Like you're so driven by this mission. I think my dad's very similar. Once he gets an idea in his head, he has to pull it off. So just kind of relating those ideas, maybe that this romanticized version of podcasting, what it looked like, you know, it's not that. It's not that. I'm not trying to achieve that. I don't. And I don't know if podcasting is that, but there are some shows out there which feel quite glamorized. And, you know, Phoebe Asks is not perfect. But it's about, you know, true entrepreneurship. It's about putting these brains on the stage and really interrogating those brains from childhood to now and seeing how they've used those brains to build some incredible businesses. And it's really, yeah, so I don't like perfection. But I think, yeah, just, I don't know what your question was. It was sort of about challenge and limiting beliefs and stuff.
Limiting beliefs, yeah.
I think just, yeah, maybe that little voice in my head saying, you can't do this, or you can't build an audience out of this theme. You can't, you know, that is the main thing for me now, is building a trusty audience who listen to my podcast every time it releases. So, you know, I will do that and it will come and the guests will become more famous. And I'm really excited about the next few months because I've got some really fantastic, juicy guests coming on the show. But maybe just that limiting belief of it's not going to work out. You're not going to pull it off. But now I don't think that is the case. I think I've got enough ammunition under my belt to make it happen.
No, definitely. You know, and even just like having looked at the socials for your podcast, you can tell that is very much the case, you know, and it's amazing to see kind of how far you've come in such a short space of time. And with the perfection, you know, I get it. I think with ADHD, something I've struggled with is always striving for perfection. But what I've learned, even just over the last few months, is you're almost limiting your own growth and by extension, the growth of, in this case, the podcast by aiming for that. Sometimes you've got to start somewhere. And for me, with this podcast specifically, you know, obviously there's like a kind of there's baseline work you need to do in order to achieve a certain quality. But I think what's quite exciting and what's been helpful for me is being able to like just build on that, you know, instead of making it perfect straight away.
Yeah.
So.
And I think coming back to product, you know, you're building a product essentially. And I think time and time again, it's quality, 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 quality. So the best conversations, the best guests, the best editing, but that's your product, right?
Yeah.
And once you've cultivated that, the socials, the video editing, the buzz around it, that's just really it. That's just secondary. So getting that product is the most important thing for me. And if I think an interview is not good enough, I won't put it out. And so I think I'm quite ruthless with myself about the preparation I put into the interviews, the questions I ask. That, you know, I don't think people realize the amount of background research we do on these people. They've got sometimes 25 years, 30, 40 years of experience under there. So I've got to come from a position of understanding all of that context. So that prep takes, you know, a couple of days. But yeah, it's worth it. 100%.
No, definitely. Yeah. And it is more often than not super rewarding. Before this next question, I want to just return to something you mentioned a few minutes ago about when you were trying to find your dummy. So this must have been a few years ago for me, but I had a similar experience where I was hoovering up and there was those little micro SD cards.
Yeah.
You know where this is going. Obviously, because it was so small, I hoovered it up and it had some like important footage on it that I needed. There I was opening up the Henry Hoover, taking the bag out and literally picking through all the bits of rubbish to find the SD card. I did find it, but part of me feels like if it wasn't for the ADHD, the hyperfocus, etc., I probably wouldn't have even bothered.
Oh my God. Well done. You found
Thank
it.
you.
Facts.
Yeah. So now every time I'm hoovering, I'm like, gotta be careful.
Gotta be careful. Don't hoover up your SD card. But yeah, like I'm quite good at finding things because I'll just hyper focus in on it and I'll be like, right, I'm gonna fucking find it. I think, that I'm glad you connect with that.
No, definitely, very much. And we'll get more onto kind of the ADHD side of things in a short while. But just returning to the podcast. So out of all of the guests you've interviewed so far, what would you say is the one thing that's resonated with you the most?
Yes, I had a little think about this one. So I think what's resonated with me is the maverick approach that all of these entrepreneurs have. So every single person I've interviewed has this slight, bar one person, which I'd say he had a very different sort of, a more sort of not autistic, but a kind of a very methodical approach. The majority of founders that I've interviewed don't really have a concept. They don't really have an understanding of rules. They think the rules are just there as a baseline, and they can really invent their own rules. So that's quite helpful for a founder. And I think it's kind of necessary because you're basically saying, I'm going to do something better, or I'm going to fill a gap in the market. And I think you have to have a slight attitude of maverick in you to pull that off. You certainly have to be quite ambitious. You have to be quite relentless and a little bit mad to like keep going and do it.
Yeah.
So I've definitely felt that come through a lot. That they're all little mini geniuses, and they all, I think, as children, struggled to go to school and, keep drawing inside the box, stay within the lines. And I struggle with that as well, because I had teachers. I remember a teacher saying to me in Spanish, for Spanish A level, she said, you're a walking disaster. En desastre corriente or something. And I was really working hard at my Spanish, and I actually got a B, which was great. And I got A's in my other subjects for A level. And she used to be so cruel. She was kind of on my side in the background, but she made my world feel so hard for 2
Yeah.
years. Another teacher in that Spanish A level, I remember her ripping my paper off me. And I had a bleeding callus on my finger from writing so fast. And we were writing about La Casa de Bernarda Alba in Spanish, and a kind of analytical essay. It was tough. And she said, you're a disaster, you're a walking disaster. And I went to Spain that summer, and I was like, I'm going to prove her wrong. And I went there, and I spent about 6 weeks with different families, just trying to immerse myself in this culture and learn the language. And I did. I came back for upper sixth, and I was almost fluent. So where am I going with this? I do not know. But, you've got to beat the odds. That's another thing. It's hardwired into my DNA that I've got to beat the odds. I can't do the failure. I won't fail. I can't. And there's a very fine line between success and failure. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
No, definitely. And I think the ADHD is going to keep coming up here because so much of what you're saying is resonating with me. But what about the determination? And I think that's one of our particular strengths, if you like, is having that just constant determination. Because when I was growing up, although I had a baseline understanding of my ADHD, my parents were key in kind of getting the diagnosis when I was younger, just like even before primary school. I didn't understand it fully, but I knew that it was a thing that I had. And I didn't really kind of, in terms of the understanding, venture beyond that. But I remember one thing my dad often used to say to me at that time was, you've kind of got to work harder than everyone else. And at the time, I was a bit like, oh, why? That doesn't really seem fair. But now, in hindsight, it was a bang on advice, because it's not that like there is struggle so much. It's just our brains work differently. So we kind of have to work harder in many ways to achieve certain goals. And I'm quite glad that he said that to me, because it's like, it's made me into who I am today and has allowed me to, graduate from uni, pass all of the milestones that you need to pass in life. And I think if it wasn't for A, the diagnosis, and B, that comment from him, things could have been very different.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, Jono, you're spot on. You're spot on. You do have to work harder. I don't know if you can relate to this. After a class, packing up your pencil case I'd be the last one in the class packing up my pencil case because I needed a bit more extra time. So processing, I was just told that I was dyslexic, basically. And I don't think it was that, because I realized my IQ is very high. I was getting A stars, but it was processing. So getting those synapses to connect and the neurotransmitters to all connect. Also learning the very syllabus and bending yourself to meet those requirements. But you just have to work unbelievably hard behind the scenes to even get to the level that your peers are at, which at the time feels like a really upwards battle. But you feel so good when you when you prove someone wrong or you get the justice.
Definitely, yeah. You
Yeah.
get a real sense of kind of pride, and I think it's
Yeah.
nice being able to talk about it with yourself because obviously you understand. And I think
Yeah.
speaking to someone who's lived that, you know, and has been through the same kind of thing, it is in many ways like therapy. So,
Yeah.
no, I'm really glad you kind of brought that up. In terms of the interviews you've carried out, is there a kind of moment or a comment that a guest has made that has stayed with you longer than expected and has kind of lingered?
Well, I had just released an interview yesterday with Perry Hayden Taylor, who is the CEO of Big Fish. So it's a huge marketing design consultancy that works with phenomenal brands like Charlie Bigham's, Callow, Tyrrell's. They don't only do the logo and the whole packaging. Sometimes he's actually put in charge of coming up with the name itself. So I'm a bit in that headspace at the moment of thinking about him and his interview. And I think something he said to me was that people in this day and age, and I think it's good to keep coming back to the people, that our generation, we're constantly told that the job market's so tough, but, you know, we come out of university and we chase the money. You chase the money, you try and find a job that will suffice and you'll be able to have a life and live in London and pay your rent. And that's all well and good. And by all means, go and do that. But I think what we do forget is, what are we good at? What are we kind of good at? And, you know, how can we really swim? How can we swim and dive into an area that really gets us going, and that's our jam, and we really enjoy it, and it kind of gives us a purpose, because we're only on this planet for 90 years, whatever. So he really encourages people and young people to explore their creativity. And I used to find that a really wishy-washy statement. I'd be like, well, fuck off. Like, sorry, but creativity, it's such a huge thing. Like, what is creativity? But yeah, listen to your creativity. And, you know, I think important, especially with kids growing up with the iPads and the iPhones and AI, to get out in the wild, in the mud, and literally roll around like a pig in the mud. And if I ever have kids, I want them to do that. I want them to play with their, you know, they get the mud underneath their fingers and really enjoy that play, because play is so important, you know, playing with other children in the wild, in the nature, and having that time to be expressive, because that, if you have that in your fundamental years, I believe that will continue into your teenagehood, into your adulthood. Playing, creativity, keep coming back to those. Don't ignore those. Don't press them down. Don't suppress them. Don't just do a 9 to 5 because you need the cash. If you need to do it for a little bit to pay off, I don't know, your overdraft, or do that, but know what it's for. And know that you can allow yourself, if you put enough things in place, you can take the leap.
Yes.
So yeah, believe in yourself.
Love that. Love that. Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant answer. And that resonates with me because I think from where I'm standing, I've mentioned obviously like my creative goals with business and whatnot, but one of the driving forces for me, yes, there's the financial element, financial security, etc. But I think working a corporate job, which, you know, pays the bills, I'm content enough with it. I get to do it from home, but it's not rewarding. Doesn't really feel like I'm kind of giving much back. And I think as I've kind of matured and grown older, I'm about to turn 30 this year.
Still really young.
True. But I kind of have more recently just figured out what it is that I want to do. And a lot of it revolves around kind of giving back, which is why, you know, the business that I'm creating, I'm deliberately being vague because I kind of want to build up some anticipation.
Yeah, and you're still working out what that idea is and stuff.
Exactly.
So I think give yourself grace.
Yeah, for sure. But to summarize, I kind of want to give back. I want to feel like I'm offering something of value that people can carry forward with them, and just something that makes them happy, which is also partially why I'm doing this podcast as well. It's not just about the neurodiversity, but it's also about giving the listeners something they can benefit from and carry forward with them. So
100%.
Yeah. So, and with that, perfect opportunity to move on to this next question, which is, as this podcast is all about deep, meaningful conversations, I've got to ask you, what's lighting you up right now?
Well, I've had the joy over the last couple of days since Wednesday of training to be a sanctum guide. So sanctum, for people who are listening, is it's a form of radical self-care. So it's a movement practice that's come about out of Amsterdam. So two guys started it in Amsterdam, and it expanded into London and Stockholm and Dubai. And it's not a cult, but it's a sort of practice where you come together, usually in a kind of ritualistic way, in a kind of, sometimes it might be a church, a huge space, and you have your headphones on and you do repetitive movements to exhaust the body, and the body is the vehicle for the brain. So as you kind of get really sweaty and there's a lot of cardio at the beginning, repetition, you exhaust the body so much that you connect with your emotional self. So tears might come up, there might be all sorts of emotion that comes out. And then you get into your energetic body, which is where you can really elevate and you can feel amazing. You can really blow off the roof. So I wanted to train, I auditioned for this, and I'm in the process of becoming a guide, because I wanted to have this as like a little spiritual side hustle amongst all my different, different work tasks. I wanted to have a part of my week that is dedicated to self-care and movement, that's not kind of embedded in gym or fitness, or, it's something a little bit more healing than that. And it's a bit deeper. So what's lighting me up right now is that it's just been amazing, the whole process. It's like quite phenomenal. I mean, everyone should go to Sanctum. You don't even have to be a good dancer or mover. You can be the most static person out there. Just go to Sanctum, find it, track it down. I think it's like £25 to go to a class. You can probably find one in London if you live here or abroad. And it will change your life. Potentially might change your life, because it's forcing you to be a kind of quite an ugly, raw version of yourself. It gets you to be quite primal.
Yeah.
So I found getting primal this week. That's been lighting me up. Yeah. Huge.
Nice. We'll have to use that as a snippet for marketing, because I think that's great what you've just said. Love that.
Yeah, primal. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. I suppose, it sounds like almost very cathartic. And I love using that word because it describes things like that perfectly.
Catharsis is a huge part of it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a whole chapter that's based on release. And yeah, so 100%. Yeah, release.
Love that. And on the flip side, what's something that you're currently trying to figure out, or something that's been weighing on your mind recently?
I think two things are on my mind at the moment. I'm waiting to hear back from a couple of companies. Done a couple of interviews lately for some exciting things. So I kind of want to know the outcome of those and what that might lead. So I'm a little bit in anticipation right now, so waiting. And that might be revealed to me next week. So we'll see. Thirdly, my heart. I think, I've now been single for like 6 months, and I am giving myself grace. And I think you really do meet your person when you're in your flow and when you're being an absolute boss. So I'm really trying to listen to my anthem, and I'm walking around London with my headphones on, playing R&B and hip hop, and I'm just being my own boss, and I'm making my own decisions when I want to, trying to really get to my friends together, get my friends around me, phone my friends in the evenings while I'm cooking, and like connect with people that love me. My mum as well, she's an absolute saint. She came up to London on Wednesday and we went shopping together, and it was so lovely. It was really wonderful. But I think this is something I'm battling with a little bit. It's just like intimacy, and I've got so much love to give. And I had a boyfriend for 2 years who I thought I was maybe going to have children with and marry, and I even moved out to Hertfordshire temporarily to be with him. So I think I'm getting over it. But, heartbreak is truly one of the most debilitating things. And for someone with ADHD, rejection dysphoria is something I've been coaching myself on. We have this rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD, I think it's called, which means that when we do get rejected or pushed away, it literally feels like you've lost a limb, or you've taken a physical punch to the stomach. And I have cried so much over the last 6 months. I have really been in the depths of hell at times. And it can make you go a bit mad. Like, it's horrible when you envisage this person with someone else, or they're moving on, and it's just disgusting, really. It can make you go mad. So I think when you go through a breakup, you can honor it, but you have to really be disciplined with yourself, especially if you have ADHD. And when you start thinking about the person, be like, right, okay, I don't need to give a whole 60 seconds to this thought or I'm not going to go into my archives and look through old photos or videos because is that going to help me? No. So I think, rejection dysphoria is a serious thing. I have been struggling with it lately, but I am moving through that. And I think it's getting better. It's definitely getting better. And I feel a lot more myself these days. Yeah.
I'm really happy to hear that. And I can relate to so much of what you've just said. I think with the ADHD, we are deeply empathetic individuals, so there's the whole RSD situation, which it is challenging because with the deeper levels of empathy, I think they can sometimes be helpful because if you really want to relate to someone, you can kind of tap into that. And
Yeah.
conversations like we're having can come in handy, but flip side, the RSD, whether you receive some criticism, which even if it's justified, sometimes it can even sting a little bit at first in hindsight, after you've had some time to process. With me, like, I'm often like, okay, yeah, that was valid advice, helpful advice that I can build on, etc. But I think with breakups and things like that, it hurts like a bitch. So I can completely understand and empathize with you.
And sometimes it's out of proportion as well. Did you really love them that much? Yes, kind of, but is it really worth it? Like that amount of agony? I don't think it is.
Yeah.
You can't quantify. Yeah, I'm glad you connect with that. I love this girl called Emily Lang.
Mhm.
She's the sister of Jamie Lang, who started Candy Kittens.
Yes, yeah.
And she's very open about her ADHD. She runs a podcast, I think, as well. She co-founded it with someone else. And she talks about it too. And she's like, God, now she's kind of happily in a relationship. She's like, God, the absolute agony I used to put myself through when I was even just going on a date, right?
Yeah.
And sorry to talk about at this level, but
No,
going
no,
on a
no.
date and then, it's a bit of a disappointment. They're not really turning you on. There's no real chemistry. And you leave the date, but you've already kind of thought, oh, I'm going to have children with this person. I'm going to take them to my family home over the weekend. You start kind of romanticizing it and thinking, oh, I love the fact that they run and we could go running together on a Saturday morning in Richmond Park. And, you sort of, because you get a lot of dopamine out of that sort of
That's
fantasy. And then you've got to be really careful because it might not work out. And then you can get a bit of a crash after that. So you have to watch your dopamine levels constantly
Definitely.
and make sure it's actually real and be really honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
Learned that the hard way at uni.
Stay grounded. Stay grounded. Sorry.
No. Really useful thing to say because I made those mistakes at uni, with the kind of impulsivity and just pouring so much in the dopamine and then the relationship doesn't work out. And it's just like this huge crash where you've pinned so much onto that relationship, inadvertently maybe put more effort into the relationship than the friendships,
Yeah. God,
and,
yeah.
and then the relationship ends and you almost have to come like, walking back to your friends of me like, I'm really sorry, et cetera. And then
Yeah.
you've got to kind of patch things up from there. And it is
Yeah.
difficult. And it took me years to try and like understand, what was kind of behind that and like the workings of my brain with the dopamine. And, although I'm medicated now, although I'm having therapy, all that kind of stuff, it's very much like still a work in progress. ADHD in general, there's so many things that I still don't really understand. For me at the moment, it's impulsivity. I'm kind of very much aware of how my impulsivity can lead me to make some stupid decisions,
Yeah.
So, but like as soon as you realize that that's a kind of thing, almost allows you to focus on it. It's like when you're doing a podcast and you say but you don't really notice it until someone points it out. Same kind of mentality. So
It's an interesting analogy. Yeah.
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 So I wanted to touch upon something because we've had similar experiences with relationships and whatnot. One thing that's really helped me, it kind of plays on mindfulness. I used to use the app Headspace, which you might be familiar with, but there was one exercise that really stuck with me when I was using it, which was if you imagine you're sitting on the side of a road and There's just loads of cars going by. And sometimes with ADHD, our kind of instinct is to run into the traffic to stop the cars, the thoughts, which just doesn't work out. And I kind of now have learned to just sit, on the side of the road, observing the cars, but not reacting to them, not running in and trying to stop them. And that's something that's really helped me over the years.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
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 Because
So,
you do have about a million thoughts a second sometimes. I mean,
yes.
the brain doesn't really shut down,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful thing if you're trying to get a project off the ground, because you've got, it's like there's no issue working out your next steps. The trajectory is there. You've got this beautiful sort of landscape of ideas and you kind of know your map. But yeah, when there's so much coming up constantly, like traffic, you can sometimes click onto one of those and you go and chase it. And then you realize, fuck, I've just wasted so much energy on that one idea. And yeah, it gets you into trouble, or you say something you shouldn't, or you make a poor decision based on an impulse that in that moment feels really strong. And I've had this issue actually with social media, is that I'm quite an impulsive person. So if I literally yesterday I did a dance in the street because I was so excited about Sanctum Day 5 and I'd like released this podcast, and people probably listening, they'll probably know what it is. And I did this like full on wacky dance and I put it up and I was like, yeah, it's awesome. And I think, whatever, people who know me loved it. And, I hope I can share positivity with my movement. But some people really thought, what the fuck is she doing? So, yes, I have those impulses all the time. I think actually management of your media is really important. I'm actually at a later stage, perhaps next year, I might get a social media manager who helps me manage my profile online. And I think I'm getting a harness over that now. And I only put up stuff that feels really relevant or really poignant that will benefit my audience. But you have to be really careful with your ADHD that you're not just, tickling another one of your, impulses. Yeah.
Definitely. I completely agree. And it definitely sounds like you're on the right track. You mentioned kind of throwing yourself into your creative endeavors, surrounding yourself with the people who lift you higher, your friends, your family. And honestly, I think that looping this back round to kind of relationships, when you're focusing on yourself and the most important connections in your life, someone will come along. It's what I've learned is when you're actively focusing on trying to find someone, it won't happen.
I really agree. My mum was always said the same thing. There's nothing more attractive than seeing someone in their prime, and they're really independent, and that's really sexy. When someone's owning their own shit and they're responsible and they're just quite free, because then that gives another person permission to get on board with that. And so it'll come at the right time. I'm sure
Definitely.
it will.
Yeah. But you're doing exactly the right things. So, ADHD, and as we've already kind of obviously delved into it a little bit already, might as well carry on doing so, especially because I know you've got to head off in 25. So, ADHD, you were diagnosed at 22, you started medication in September of last year. How have you found being medicated?
Yes. So this week, so I take breaks. I'm currently not on the medication this week because I've had a flu, and it's recommended sometimes that if you're unwell, that you take some time off the medication, because otherwise your body's on like overdrive and it's not going to really fix itself. Because I've been put on a stimulant medication, which is Elvans, 20 milligrams, which is a very small dose. When I'm on it, I'm like very driven and very focused. It's not really going to let me rest. And I think I had a chest infection. I was on antibiotics. So it was recommended to take time off Elvans. So for people listening today, I'm not medicated currently during this conversation. So actually, I would have been even more impulsive during this conversation than usual, which is, does that surprise you?
Yeah, because I mean, I'm on Concerta, 36 milligrams, similar to Elvance. Firstly, I didn't know about kind of maybe not taking it if you're unwell, which I am at the moment. It's just been something that I actually feel anxious if I haven't taken it, because I'm that reliant on it. Yeah, I mean, I suppose what surprises me is obviously from where I'm standing, I need it to focus, but like you kind of retain that focus even though you're not on it at the moment. So good on you.
I know. And I think I knew this week I was going to be doing a lot of physical activity. So I've been doing exercise every day for 4 hours. So if I've got a lot of exercise in my program, I'm getting a lot of dopamine from that. So that dopamine raises my levels in my brain.
Yeah.
And therefore I'm able to focus and feel happy and be productive and do all the things I need to do in my day and not be late for my train or my bus or my appointment. So I think if I've worked out, I got some professional advice from a doctor, and he said, Phoebe, because you're very active, if you have a very active day, you don't necessarily need to take Elvans that day.
Wow.
So how have I found the medication? Should we just talk about that generally? I was assessed and put on methylphenidate, which was actually horrendous. I took it and I felt like I was on cocaine, but on a really high dose. My whole body was alive, felt like I was shaking. And I was like dry mouth and headache and bug huge eyes, quite aggressive and really anxious. Got a lot of work done, sort of, but almost couldn't, like, my rib cage felt like there was fire inside my rib cage, and all the little anxiety around my like lymph nodes, so around my like armpits and my rib cage, everything was like twitching. And I felt really unwell, and I was twitching. So I couldn't actually relax, couldn't sit down really. I was like, and so I remember that night on methylphenidate, I went to the gym and I sort of like punched a bag just to try and get out. And I actually cried because I was just so overwhelmed. And I hate drugs. Like I don't really did drugs in South America when I was 18, but I don't really get on well with drugs because, I've done drugs, but for people who have ADHD, drugs actually make you feel normal because, cocaine makes you feel normal because it's dopamine. So, I realized at university that I didn't need it because I had so much energy as it is. So going back to medication, if I stay focused, I then explored Elvans. So it was a stimulant medication that would help focus, but wouldn't make me feel like I was going to have a heart attack. And I went on that in sort of late September, October. And that was okay. I could endure it. Like I could get through my day with it in my system. And I felt instantly, it was sort of like when you come up on Elvans in the morning, when you take it at 8:30 with breakfast, they recommend taking it with protein. It sort of actually, it makes you feel quite happy and alive and very awake. I didn't need to take it with coffee. Taking it with coffee was actually quite a lot. No one tells you that though, by the way. They'll just, they don't really give you the ropes that you need. But I felt weirdly a bit, not numb, but of sedate. You do a bit sedated because you're sort of glued in and your brain has a sort of weird foggy feeling, and you're sort of, your mind changes. So you're like, zoom, and suddenly your sense of humor goes. I found that my kind of comedy, that kind of goes, and your sense of play and your impulsivity, that all sort of dissipates. Because suddenly all of that just isn't relevant, and you just got to get your work done. So you become a lot more normal, I guess, in the kind of, all your ADHD loveliness sort of goes away. And you're really able to see very clearly on your piece of paper, your to-do list, what you need to get done. And there's no distraction because it's just simple. And someone said to me quite early on, it felt like all the ropes, all the wires are just kind of being smoothed out, and each wire is nice and straight, and you can see your destination.
Yes.
There's none of this interweaving.
Yeah.
Which I really did feel. And what they don't tell you is the insomnia. The staying up until midnight because you're still wired, around the sort of trial titration period, which is the first of 6 weeks, I was feeling very anxious and unable to sleep. And the people around me found that quite hard to watch, I think. My mum was like, is this the right medicine? It was quite hard seeing her daughter be like that. And my mum didn't realize at first the impact. And she was like, you've turned into a complete bitch. I want you to know that, you've lost all sense of emotion. You've become really bitchy and really awful. And you need to know this, you're really not pleasant. I was quite argumentative and quite front-footed and quite kind of, oh, for fuck's sake, just this is the answer. Because you're suddenly the smartest person in the room, right?
Yeah.
Because your neurotransmitters are connecting, the fucking answer. Yeah. And there's so much superfluous chat that we have in meetings and interactions. And all of that just feels irrelevant. because you know the answer. And I think my mum found that really hard. She was like,
Mhm.
fucking hell. So yeah, but I think during that process, don't ignore fully, but listen to your loved ones, but also know that your chemistry of your brain is actually being changed. And of course, you're going to be different. But I kept checking in with my doctor and going back to my doctor every 2 to 3 weeks and telling him what my symptoms were. And there was a very funny consultation actually last year where I was doing some babysitting in the evening in Notting Hill, and I had an appointment with my doctor at 8 o'clock. This is the most ADHD thing I think I've ever said. And my mum wanted to come onto the call to ask some questions about the medication Elvans. And I couldn't find anywhere to take the call, so I had to go into Itsu in Notting Hill and go into the bathroom. The women's bathroom was full, so I went into the men's bathroom and I opened up my laptop in one of the cubicles and started a therapy conversation in the bathroom loo. And there was a man next to me. He was like, "All right, love, can you take this elsewhere?" And I was like, I think I could actually die. And I opened my laptop, and of course they knew that I was in the bathroom. And the doctor was like, where are you? And my mum and they were literally, I think they were howling because they were like, what is she doing? And I had to take this laptop call into another space. It was so chaotic. And I fucking hate that word chaotic because everyone says, oh, Phoebe Averdieck, she's so chaotic. And that's a really damaging thing to say to someone with ADHD because no one wants to be told they're chaotic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I actually don't think I am that chaotic, but probably I am chaotic at times. And by the way, we had the consultation happened. It was useful. I told them about my sleep deprivation. And he basically said, okay, Phoebes, I want you to take some time off. So weekends, Saturdays and Sundays are yours.
Love that.
And Tuesdays, when you teach 3 classes in the morning, don't take Elvans. So I started monitoring. So I only on it like 4 days a week. And then, I hope that's useful. But the general outcome of Elvans is that it's helped me get projects over the line and stick at something for a long period of time, especially with the podcast. But I'm also able to get stuff like I delivered an episode this week, worked with my 2 editors, one in London, one in Lisbon, without the medication. So
Nice.
I'm still getting my prescription and I'm using it mostly. But I'm a little bit more in control of when I use it now.
Love that. Love that. No, it
Yeah.
sounds like you've got a perfect balance. And I think your journey's been very similar to mine because it took me a fair amount of time and there was quite a lot of experimentation with, finding the right dosage. But ultimately, it has been a game changer. I think for me, when I first started it, I felt really numb because I was on the highest dose, 54
Right.
milligrams, and it
Wow.
tried to, yeah, it was not pleasant. It gave me like extreme levels of focus, sure, but what came with that was like it stripped away the personality, the creativity. I wasn't enjoying any of my usual creative pursuits,
Yeah.
podcasting, whatever. It's just like I had no motivation. And after a few weeks, I was like, I can't carry on like this.
Yeah.
Long story short, all good, lowered the dose, now I'm 36. Perfect balance still allows me to kind of be myself, but also I've got that focus as well. So it does take a bit of time.
And how does concerta, how is that different to Elvans? What's the difference? Do you know?
So Elvance, you said it's got methylphenidate in, right?
No, it doesn't.
It's different. Okay.
It's different. That's a completely different medicine.
Interesting. So I've never been on Elvance, but so Concerta, it is methylphenidate.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I mean, I was on it when I was at secondary school, and then I took a break pretty much all throughout college and uni, and then went back on it after uni because that's when I really started to become aware of how ADHD affects me on a daily basis. And then as soon as I I got the adult ADHD diagnosis, started on the medication, and then just something just flicked in my brain. Now I just, I don't want to say I'm overly reliant on it, but I noticed the difference when I forget to take it. So
yeah.
yeah.
I wonder what you'd be like on Elvans, for example. It's
Maybe
still
I'll find out.
Yeah, maybe it'd be interesting to try.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah, I definitely, when I've been on it for a period of time and then it's like in my body, I wake up and I kind of feel like I need it because it's like coming off any kind of drug, you sort of get addicted or used to feeling like it's in your system. So then your body feels you get a few pangs of anxiety because you're like, I need my dose. But yeah, I think it's all manageable and really useful. A great tool, right? To be able to, I just use it when I need to work. basically. Yeah.
No, definitely. That's
Yeah.
that's where it helps me as well. So I want to delve a little bit more into your diagnosis. Prior to receiving it, what was your understanding of ADHD? And also before you started the medication, how did it affect you on a day-to-day basis?
I must have been about 21, 22. And I was quite but thing is, what was weird is that I'd done my A-levels and I was on track to get a first at Bristol. So I knew I was smart and I didn't have an issue with getting to the library at 9 o'clock and working until 4.
Mhm.
This is the odd thing. And I've spoken to people with ADHD and they literally said they couldn't have got through their exams without the medication. So that's why I probably didn't get the medication at 22, because I was like, I've come this far. I'm about to get a first. I'm on track to drama school. I know that I work really hard. I think if I just exercise and get good sleep and eat well, then I can maintain my life. And so I kind of did. And at drama school, I moved up to Glasgow for a year, did a really intensive master's up there at the conservatoire. And I think it was while I was up there working very hard and in a very different way to how I'd ever worked before, which was with my body in rehearsal rooms every day.
Mhm.
I got really ill and it was my contraceptive coil got infected and I had an infection and had a fever and it was very bad. And unfortunately, it was like a perfect storm because it was my finals. So it was like my final
Yeah.
project, a lot of stress. And I was so unwell. I had a bit of a mental breakdown, to be honest, where I was like, that physical pain led me to like antibiotics that made me go a bit crazy. And I took some time out, probably 3 weeks off. And I was like, whoa, I need to sort my life out. And then I graduated, I was like, graduated, I was like, big tick, moved to London. I fell in love. And I think going into a big relationship with someone who was very structured and, who wanted to do a shared diary and worked in a corporate job and property, that really helped me actually, because I was suddenly going to dinners at, 6 o'clock, 7:30 dinner at this restaurant. And, it was all quite kind of prim and proper. And that
Mhm.
actually helped my ADHD because I was like, right, this is who I am now. I'm a very organized individual. And I think that's why I went into corporate stuff, is because he was in that field as well.
Mhm.
So I, again, ignored it. But he always told me, I think you have it. I think you need to get medicated for it. Had the odd breakdown, had the odd emotional outburst, and it would always end up in tears. And we'd always say, I think I need a bit of help, And then it was not until I actually left United
Mm.
that I was really like, okay, I think I need to assess my options again.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to a life coach, and the anecdote I gave her was, this morning I went to teach a class and I left the window open to the
Mm.
house and I don't think I properly locked the door. And I think I left the oven on. And it's like those security things. I could have actually blown up the house. And the class was fantastic. One of the best classes I've ever taught. But I came back and unfortunately my boyfriend at the time saw all these things and he was
Mm.
like, this is really, you're out of control. And to be told you're out of control, and when they look at you as though they're disappointed in you. And I told my therapist this and she said, Phoebe, you've got to take the medication. And I cried because I was like, I really don't want to take the medication.
Yeah.
I really don't. And I felt like I'd really hit rock bottom actually. And then I started taking it and it was really tough at first, but it gets better and it has helped. And look at me now.
There you go.
Yeah. So I think you just gotta, sometimes it's those moments in life that are really tough. You just got to work through them, trust the professionals, work
Yeah.
with your doctor, get enough advice, not too much advice, because actually you can watch a lot of stuff online that's not helpful. But,
Mm.
don't drink coffee when you're starting medication. Really, maybe spend some time locking in self-care. So
Yeah.
make sure, go for your swims in the evening, do some meditation at night, eat 3 sturdy meals a day. I
Yes.
lost my appetite on Elvans. I actually went down to 57 kilograms. I lost a lot of weight. So you will lose weight if you're taking a stimulant medication.
Been there. I went
So,
down. I was
yeah,
on, what was it? When I was on one of the higher dosages. I've always
yeah.
been skinny. I haven't weighed myself recently, but I'm about 8, 9 stone. Yeah, I'm underweight, but I'm not, it's never like made me feel unwell. But when I was on a higher dose, I started losing more weight and that was a
Mm.
major concern. So sorry, I interrupted you, but I know how like medication, it can be difficult at first, but like you said, I think once you've kind of stuck with it and you've given it a chance and you've trusted the professionals, it does make a difference. But what I will say is it's not a fix all. Although it has helped with so many things, it
Yeah.
doesn't help with, it's not just like, oh, you take it and then it's problem solved. For me, I've had to combine it with therapy, self-development, like time management, good routines, good structures. And it's you have to like manage all of that as well as the medication, because it's not going to do that for you.
No, it won't fix you. It won't fix you.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so people think sometimes that it will just fix you, and it doesn't fix you. And what
No.
does that even mean, fix me? I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, really.
We don't need
But
to be fixed.
you
Yeah.
don't need to be fixed. And I think also for people listening, you're probably thinking, fucking hell, who are these people? But ADHD is so common. I
Mm.
think it's so common. And, your parents probably have it, Jono, do they?
I
Signs of it?
suspect my dad.
Yeah, so same. I think it travels through the paternal line quite a lot. My dad definitely has it. So, and look, he's an incredibly successful guy. You're successful in your own right. I'm successful in my own right. You can be successful. And it's often the people who have ADHD or something, show signs of neurodiversity. Those are the people who unlock really exciting things. They're the risk takers. They're the mavericks. They think outside the box. So do not shun these people, because actually they're often really fun, and they're also full of life and, really exciting people to be around. And you can form really deep connections with people with ADHD, and, you can still trust them and you can still have a really good relationship with them. You just got to communicate. I think communication is really important.
Great.
Because I noticed that if my anxiety goes too high, I stop communicating, and that can be quite scary because then I'm misunderstood, and it's quite hard to, So, but celebrate it. Don't shit on it, basically.
I completely agree. And you know what? That feels like the perfect kind of time to bring this episode to an end. Saying that, I feel like we have only touched the surface. With ADHD specifically, there's so many positives. We've kind of referenced them briefly. Things like risk taking, all of the strengths that come with ADHD, especially within the field of entrepreneurship, and creative endeavors. So love to have you back on, Phoebe, so we can kind of delve more into that in future.
Sure.
But no, it's been brilliant having you here, and it's been great. You the first guest for the Time for a DMC podcast. Can't think of anyone better. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
No
Yeah,
worries.
please continue to follow the channel Phoebe Asks. Lots of really great founders are coming. I'm flying out to Barcelona in March to interview a founder there. That's actually very, very soon. And that's actually a little bit of a clue. So if you know your founders who lives in Barcelona, you might be able to figure it out. So yeah, please do keep subscribing to Phoebe Asks. You can listen to the full interviews on Spotify, and you can watch the reels on Instagram, and you can also listen to it on Apple Podcasts as well. So thank you so much. Thank you,
go.
Jono.
No worries.
Yeah.
Before we wrap things up, I've got a feature which I'm going to jump into now. And it's a little ritual that we do here on the DMC. Every guest leaves behind a deep, meaningful question, a DMQ, for the next voice in this space. So it could be something you wish someone had asked you earlier in life, something you're currently wrestling with, or something that reveals a little more beneath the surface. Now, Phoebe, you're the first ever guest to take part in this, and the first ever guest full stop. And I can't think of a better person to launch it. So what I'm going to do, I will be sending you a link after this where you'll be able to write your DMQ in your own handwriting. And that is the question that will live on, waiting for the next guest to see it. Doesn't have to be perfect, just honest. And then you'll be able to kick off this segment from there.
Love this. I love that. It kind of gives longevity, doesn't it?
Exactly. That's the idea.
But until next time, thank you.
Perfect. No worries. Phoebe, thank you again for being our first ever guest. Thoroughly enjoyed our DMC, and I can't wait to have you back. You've already plugged your socials. That was going to be my next question. So with that, we'll end things here.
Thank you. Bye, Jono. Have a fantastic day. Bye.
Take care.